Hi, and welcome to the Ready for Love series. I'm Iris Benruby, your host, and today I'm really excited to have a new guest. I've got Wendi Dumbroff. Welcome, Wendi.
Thank you so much, Iris. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you on because you're going to talk to us about how to create emotional, fulfilling, and intimate relationship with a partner.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's a big job, right?
I think we could probably spend a month on this one.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
let's get to the meat of it. Often, people have grown up in their families, whatever their normal looks like. What is a healthy, fulfilling, intimate relationship? What are some markers of that? What are people looking to create?
Yeah, such a great question, right? Because I think everyone would sign up for the answer to that one, right? I I am of the belief, and in my training through the Ackerman Institute and all, there is no one truth, right? And so what is fulfilling for me may not be fulfilling for someone else. I personally am in a monogamous marriage. Other people are in open marriages. And so fulfilling and what is intimate and fulfilling really varies on who you're speaking with, right? And so, but how can someone create the situation that works for them? That is really, I think, a good way to look at it, right? Because what works for you doesn't work for me, doesn't work for
Yeah. And
whether.
it's great to almost have permission to create what works for ourselves rather than to fit into a paradigm or whatever it is that we saw or learned or saw on TV.
Yes,
So
yeah.
let's talk about what does an emotionally healthy relationship look like? Because many people didn't grow up in one, so they don't really know what that looks like.
Right. That's so true. And so often, what happens, as you well know, as a psychotherapist, what we observe in our childhood and what happens in our childhood, for example, there's no space for my emotional experience. There is mom's depressed, or it's just there's this unspoken message. We don't talk about bad things. We only talk about positive things, or there's too much trouble going on here for me to bring my difficult experience. And so people learn to cope with that. For example, a person who doesn't have space, they may learn to cope by just going inside, shutting it all down, not dealing with it, not experiencing it. And then unconsciously, we take the way that we cope in childhood into our adult relationships. It's kind of the dance we're doing, and we just keep doing it. And then we find someone else who's doing maybe a dance that matches ours or works with our dance, and we settle into a relationship. A lot of what I do as a couples therapist and as a sex therapist is unpuzzling that, looking at the pieces and how it is in motion for them, and then of course looking at how we can reconfigure it. So if partners come and say, well, my partner doesn't talk to me, they just shut down, they're not talking to me, and they don't communicate, right? And well, what do you do? Because maybe the one person who didn't have space for their emotions learned to shut it down. Maybe another person learned to be very loud, to try and be heard and try and be heard and try and be heard. And so they went after them. And so you end up with a partner, one that just kind of shuts down, the other one comes after them. But the more the other one comes after them, the more they shut down. And the more they shut down, the more the other comes after. Those are the cycles that I look at. So look at what's going on between you, what happens between you, and how can we create change. And I think it's useful for people when they begin to understand how their childhood informs their adult life and how they're moving, and they gain awareness of that. Then they begin to have choice as to what I do with this feeling.
What I love about what you just said is to start to look at how we behave in a relationship might actually be creating what it is that we don't want. So
Exactly.
yeah. So if you're
Exactly.
chasing your partner to talk to you and he's pulling back, I'm going to use the typical genders. It could be the other way around. it may be impacting him to want to pull back even more. And if you're this partner that pulls back, you're almost causing, not quite causing, but impacting your partner to want to chase you. And you keep this paradigm alive, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy that he never speaks, she's always on my case.
Mhm.
And this is an
Mhm.
opportunity to take responsibility. What I'm hearing from you is to take your power back and go, how do I do this differently to get what I want?
Yes, absolutely. And my work is very informed by the vulnerability cycle that Michelle Shankman and Mona Fishbane created. And it's also very informed by mindfulness because when and my training at Ackerman with the genogram work and the family of origin, right? And so I always do genograms and I create this vulnerability cycle. I wish I had a diagram of it today. I don't, but it's out there to look up.
Can I
And
can I just ask you to explain what a genogram is for anyone who's not familiar
yes,
with that?
absolutely. So a genogram, in short form, we'll say family tree, right? So we've all seen genograms, mom and dad, and then there's a line across and the children, and then who they married and going down. But I look at it very relationally and thematically. Who was your mother? Who was your father? Give me adjectives. What were your relationships like with them? What was their relationship like? What did you learn about what it meant to be a mother, a father, a couple? What were the messages, spoken and unspoken, in your family? How did you know that it wasn't okay to talk about your feelings? Oh, well, was just that message was made clear. Nobody said it, but nobody did it, you know. Okay, so that was a very unspoken message, but it penetrated, right? Of course it did. And so it's looking at not just who begat whom, but the themes and the messages and the relational piece. And sometimes it will be, for example, when you're working with someone who has a very negative narrative about themselves, right? Perhaps you want to look at a genogram based on stories of strength in the family, because this person has come away from their family and their experiences saying, oh, I'm damaged, I'm terrible, I'm no good. There is the story of what happened, right? And then there is the meaning that we make of that story. And so sometimes a genogram will look at, well, what themes can we address here? What were also stories of strength? Oh, so there was abuse in your family, but this person stepped in and protected you, right? What did you learn from that? Wow, that's part of your legacy also,
Mm.
right? And so the genogram is rich and full with information, not only in our family of origin, but going up a generation. What happened in your grandparents' lives? How did that inform things? The intergenerational transmission of trauma. We see it with, for example, um, Holocaust survivors, right? I have friends whose parents were in the Holocaust who are survivors. I've had clients who, um, one woman in particular comes to mind where someone would have said that maybe just hearing her stories that she was paranoid. Oh, you can't trust this or that. You can't trust a restaurant or the food. But really, it was her mother's messages that were given very tacitly not to trust the world because she couldn't trust the world, right? And so the genogram is rich with information that comes through, and it informs who we are, and it informs how we move in relationships and how we cope, and also what triggers us, right?
Yeah, and I love what you said because it gives us access to how we show up in relationships. So, from earlier on, you said if you grew up in a family where you only talk about positive things, or you grew up in a family where you didn't quite get told this, but you could infer that you don't trust anyone. So, how does that impact how you show up in relationship? You're not going to trust your partner. You're not going to talk about the things that upset you.
Yes.
So,
Yes. And so that brings us back to that question of how to make this more fulfilling, because now you're in a situation, it worked in childhood, right? It worked in childhood to shut up. This is a new context, and it's a very different context. Now you've got a partner who wants to hear, who wants to know, who wants you to talk about it, but you've been programmed from the earliest age not to. All of this plays unconsciously. That's where I bring the mindfulness piece in, because when people really get in touch with, oh, let me sit with this. My partner's asking for something, and I'm automatically turning away from it. I always offer the quote by Viktor Frankl, which is, between the stimulus and the response, there's a space. And in that space is your power and your freedom. And I look at that space as the space of mindfulness. This is reactivity, right? Where something happens and we automatically react. Our partner comes to us with something, we can't deal with it, we turn away. When we open that space where we begin to look at it, then we can recognize what's going on in there. Well, it feels uncomfortable to sit with this. I don't know why. Because those messages aren't necessarily in our conscious knowing. They're just with us. They're the undercurrent, the river that runs underneath the ground that informs everything we do, but out of our awareness. So bringing that into our awareness and understanding that really helps us to be more present. The awareness gives us choice. Oh, my partner's asking me for something, and I'm aware that I am having a lot of difficulty staying with it. What's this about? Let me open to that difficulty. It feels so foreign. It feels so uncomfortable. It feels embarrassing. It feels vulnerable. It feels whatever it feels for a person. And can I hold this and still stay present? Can I hold this discomfort and still be present? This gives you the opportunity to respond versus react, right? This is reactivity that puts you in your cycle, that you kind of spin that wheel and you just keep going in the way you've gone till some crisis occurs. Maybe there's an affair, maybe there's just someone threatens divorce because there's a unusually big blowout. And that's when couples land in my office. So learning, I think what creates fulfilling emotional relationships is when someone can really look inside themselves and understand what's informing it. Have empathy also for the needs of their partner and what's informing their partner's chase of them. Just as important. Oh, when I don't respond, they feel so unheard and so unwanted and so worthless because no one heard them when they were growing up. And that it works that they can see each other's needs and work together to give each other what they need, and at the same time exploring their own needs and working towards something more useful for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually reminds me of a couple that I was just working with where she came in and said, she was so angry at him because he told her to be careful while she was out there. And she thought, who is he to tell me what to do? And that was the reaction. And once we slowed down a little bit and got underneath there, is that she had a mother that was a helicopter parent, always telling her what to do, not giving her any space to grow. And she was still reacting from that place.
Yeah.
So if we could go with what you were just speaking about, if she can slow down and be with, he just told me to be careful. I feel uncomfortable. I know it's from my mom. I
Yeah.
still feel uncomfortable about it.
Yes.
What's the next step?
Okay. Such a great question. Because the truth is, she may always feel uncomfortable with that, right? You can't help that. We can't help the way we feel, but we can always help what we do with it. So in this case, it sounds like she blew up at him, right? And how dare you tell me? For her to take a breath and say, Joe, when you say that to me, it brings back my whole childhood experience. And it's hard for me. I wonder if we can learn whatever it is she needs. Maybe can we work together to find a different way for you to ask me things? Or can I take a pause and also realize, hey, you know what? This is my partner, and he, she, they love me, and they really care about me. This is coming from a place of caring. This is coming from a place of love. This is coming from a place of concern. They want to make sure I'm okay when I'm out there in the world and I'm maybe going to be walking alone at night somewhere, right? They want to make sure that I'm okay. This this comes from a different space. This is not, it's also about how that past can collapse into the present.
Mhm.
And part of our own work is beginning to separate past from present, right? We need to know this isn't my critical mother, my intrusive mother. This is my partner that loves me and cares about me. I'm sorry.
No, no, not at all. And what I love about what you just said is it comes back to the title of this conversation. This is how you build emotional intimacy in a relationship, by being real, owning your stuff, talking about historically what comes forward, what you need from a partner, watching your partner step up and give you what you need. It's like, oh, I can actually relax in this relationship because my partner is
Yes.
willing to give me what I need.
Yes. And one of the other things, and as you were talking, it brought to mind the word vulnerability. And I think, especially we've all as therapists seen these kind of tough guys that come in and they say, oh, I don't do this therapy stuff, it's not for me, and I'm tough. I don't need the, and in my opinion, and I mean, I think we can all agree that being vulnerable and touching those weakest parts is so much harder than being puffed up and tough, right? That's the defense. And so getting below that vulnerability and being vulnerable with each other is also something that builds intimacy together.
And that's where the juice is.
Yes, yes, absolutely. There's a wonderful poem. I don't have it. I learned it in my mindfulness circles and training, but it's called The Unbroken by Rashani Ray. And it really is about going to that space of drilling down to that most vulnerable space and communicating from there, right? Communicating from there. When we communicate, not from the anger, but you use that uh, body language before, that's the hands before, you said when you go underneath. The anger is the defense. The upsetness, we can also use anger or whatever, or shutting down, whatever it is, as a bell of mindfulness to say, oh, this is a reminder to me that I need to think about this. Let me go underneath it. And invariably, we are covering something very soft and vulnerable, because it's hard to go back to that little child that was so afraid of her mother, or felt so intruded upon, or felt like she had no space, felt like she had no voice, perhaps, or no way to express her need, because her mother was saying, you need this to do this, to do this, to do this, to do this. Right? And to touch that and to speak from that
Mm.
creates closeness.
It creates a new paradigm rather than the chase, withdraw. You
Exactly.
create a moving towards one another.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wendy, I was going to say, if there was one thing you would hope our viewers take away from today, what would that be?
I think it would be that, something I find myself saying to clients more and more, because people blame themselves. I know I shouldn't do this. I know I shouldn't do this. Yeah, yeah. Someone I just spoke to, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I still haven't gotten over XYZ, right? I think we all have good reasons for feeling the way we feel and doing what we do, right? That client of yours has a good reason for reacting the way she did. It makes sense, right? It's not necessarily useful in her life, and there's exploration to be done and understanding to be done. But I think really getting curious about how you react and why you react that way bringing compassion to that. I mean, for her to be able to bring compassion to that wounded child, and what would she say to her now, right? To make her feel better. And to have the awareness that, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I'm not that helpless child. I'm a sovereign adult. I am on my own. I can take care of myself. And my partner cares and loves for me. So I think it's really getting curious and having empathy for ourselves and our partner, and recognizing, wow, they're reacting in a really sort of big way. Something's happening for them. So I think compassion and curiosity, and beginning not to judge ourselves so harshly, are good starting points while we get curious. Yeah.
All right, with that, Wendi, I want to say thank you so much for the time that you've shared with us today, all of this wisdom that you've gathered and shared with us, and the difference that you make in the world.
Thank you so much, Iris. I really, really do appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.